What's up, gamers? It's Above, and today I have a Solar 3.0 build that is going to blow your minds. My buddy Spop actually led me onto this build because, as you've probably noticed, I don't play much Titan, but it's safe to say that I'll be playing it a hell of a lot more this season. This Immortal Sunbreaker build is easily one of the most busted builds I've ever seen in my time playing Destiny, and honestly makes pre-nerf Protective Light look like a joke. You can tank so much damage with this that it's actually hilarious at times and is going to benefit you so much in endgame PvE content that I just had to share it. If you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated, and I'll have all of Spop's links down in the description below as well. Now, with all of that said, let's get into it. First things first, let's talk base stats. You're gonna want to get as close to 100 resilience as possible. If you didn't see my previous video, the resilience stat actually received a massive buff this season and is now arguably the most important stat in PvE. Tier 10 resilience now grants a 40% damage reduction to all incoming damage. This is equal to pre-nerf Protective Light, except you don't need your shield to be broken for this to proc. It's literally just active at all times. If you're like me and sharded most of your resilience heavy gear, I highly recommend slotting resilience armor on your ghost so you can start collecting high resilience armor to reach that 100 resilience threshold. You'll also want to be as close to 100 recov as possible. You don't need much strength in this build because our throwing hammer basically has 100% uptime. This is easily the best charged melee option available to us, as it has incredible damage, its own curing effect, and will be essential to the elemental well build that we'll be using today. To avoid frustration with the throwing hammer, I highly recommend unbinding your auto melee ability and creating two separate keybinds for your charged and uncharged melees. This prevents meleeing an enemy instead of using your throwing hammer unexpectedly, which can be incredibly annoying. I paired this with the solar grenade, mostly for consistent overload stuns, but the thermite and healing grenades are also solid options. Diving into our aspects, the first one we'll be using is Sol Invictus, which states that solar ability final blows and defeating scorched targets will create sunspots. Your abilities will also regen faster, and your super will last longer when in that sunspot. Your sunspots will proc regeneration for your allies as well, so this is great for both solo and team play. There are several exotics that work incredibly well with this build, including Loreley Splendor, which begins health regeneration when you cast your barricade, Heart of Inmost Light, which empowers your abilities as you use them, and my personal favorite, Phoenix Cradles, which not only doubles the duration of your sunspots, it also gives health regeneration to your teammates when they pass through them. This build allows me to consistently out-heal incoming damage, even in under-leveled content. Our second aspect will be Roaring Flames, which states that solar ability final blows increase the damage of your solar abilities, and stacks up to 3 times. The throwing hammer has nearly unlimited uptime, which means that Sol Invictus will allow our hammer to create sunspots, while Roaring Flames allows our hammer to consistently one-shot enemies, even in high-level content. The footage you're seeing in this video is from the 1560 Legend Nightfall. These are on-level champions and enemies, and this build allows me to consistently out-heal the incoming damage, which is honestly insane when you consider the damage output of Cabal-type enemies. As for our fragments, we have Ember of Torches, which allows our powered melee attack, aka our throwing hammer, to make our fire team radiant every time we melee an enemy. Yeah, you heard that right. Not every time you kill an enemy, every time we melee an enemy with our hammer. This means that we'll have a constant 25% damage bonus at all times, along with improved handling and reload speed for both you and your teammates. And that damage bonus is apparently stacking with other buffs and debuffs, which is insanely strong. Next up, we have Ember of Solace, which increases the duration of radiant and restoration effects, both of which we'll be using constantly. This makes our hammer and sunspots even more valuable in all areas of the game. I also used Ember Hammer of Wonder, which allows rapid ignition defeats to generate an orb of power, but I mostly use this for the plus 10 to my resilience. I'm sure I'm not the only one lacking resilience gear. And lastly, we have Ember of Searing, which states that defeating scorched targets grants melee energy, which is nice if you do happen to lose your hammer. This also provides a passive plus 10 to our recovery, which is nice because this is a relatively stat-hungry build. So let's recap. At 100 resilience, we have a 40% base damage resistance at all times. Soul Invictus gives us sunspots, which heals not only ourselves, but our allies, all while accelerating our ability regen. We have a throwing hammer that heals us, creates an insane number of sunspots for survivability, procs infinite radiance for a damage bonus, and we have Roaring Flames, which makes all of these abilities stronger and more consistent across all levels of content. This build, with no mods at all, feels incredibly strong. So if you're a new player lacking mods, this build is perfect for you. And if you're a veteran player that does have armor mods at your disposal, well, we're just getting started. The most important mod in this entire build is Melee Wellmaker. This allows us to create solar wells every time we defeat a target with our throwing hammer. I slotted this on an arc class item so I could pair it with 1-2 finisher, an arc mod that allows you to replenish your melee ability when performing a finisher at the cost of 1/6 of your super. So if we happen to lose our hammer, which can definitely happen, we can immediately get it back. And if you pair this with something like reactive pulse on your helmet, you'll get a powerful overshield in the process. Now, this is where the build gets crazy. We're going to pair Melee Wellmaker with Well of Life, which grants increased regeneration for 10 seconds after picking up a solar well. And yes, this stacks with your sunspots. This means that every time we get a melee kill, we'll create both a sunspot and a solar well, proccing double regeneration. This alone allows you to out-heal most incoming damage, but pair this with our base 40% resistance and double resist mods on our chest piece, and you're basically immortal, hence the title of the video. I put Well of Life on my gauntlets because it's cheap and leaves plenty of room to slot things like weapon loaders and champion mods. We'll be using Explosive Wellmaker on our solar chest piece, which allows explosive multi-kills to spawn a solar well, giving us additional sources of healing. My preferred loadout would look something like this. Gallahorn is my heavy weapon, Forbearance as my special, and any primary kinetic weapon of your choice. Weapons like Salvager's Salvo, Witherhoard, Tiku's Divination, Sunshot, and any other chain reaction weapon also work incredibly well for this. And lastly, I use Seeking Wells on my boots, which allows all of these wells to track to my current position. So whether you're using your melee or your weapons, you'll be spawning wells at all times, and they will always track towards you, which makes this build unbelievably easy to use. Thing that I love about this build is that it's just getting started. We don't even have all of our artifact mods unlocked yet, and seeing that it's Season of the Solar, things like Withering Heat, Flame Harvesting, and Solar Fulmination will only make this build better over time. This build gives me the power fantasy of playing the ultimate support tank. I can draw a ton of aggro, tank an insane amount of damage, and destroy enemies in the process. Anyways guys, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a like and subscription if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!